Craig Smoak.
All right, this 5 o'clock hour, John Machota, theathletic.com, covers the Cowboys, joins us on SicEm365 Radio. So, John, among the players the Cowboys have who are active on this roster or who we think are their main players, how many of them do you think are the best at their position in the NFL?
Oh, geez, probably none of them. No, let me think. I feel like other than Zach Martin at right guard.
That's the only one I could think of.
Yeah, I wouldn't say any others are. I mean, there's certainly nobody on defense, so you can just get rid of that. Dak's obviously not the best quarterback. Zeke's not the best running back. They don't have the best. They could have arguably the best wide receiver trio, but none of them individually. So yeah, Tyron Smith didn't have to deal with the injuries that he's had. I mean, he certainly is talented enough to be in that left tackle discussion. But yeah, Martin would probably be the only one.
John, do you expect any of the undrafted free agents to make enough noise to maybe not get on the roster, but get on the, on the let's see how these guys do over the next couple of years list?
That's a good question. The only reason why I'm a little skeptical is just because of the fact that they drafted 11 guys, and I think that there is a realistic possibility that most, if not all of those 11 could make the team. And so I think that takes up a lot of roster spots on a team that is relatively young to begin with. So I just don't see many, maybe if you look at like the backup running back spot behind Tony Pollard, maybe one of those guys gets kind of in the mix. But generally where you see teams kind of get an undrafted guy that ends up sticking is that wide receiver. And I just don't see that with this team at all. I think it's pretty set with who the receivers are going to be. So I don't really see a guy there. And then like last year, obviously you see Terrence Steele start and play a lot of the season, and then Brandon Knight, the same thing, who was undrafted the year before. I just don't see an undrafted guy really making a dent on that offensive line either. So, no, I really don't, because if they would have had maybe a more typical draft, or maybe they had 7 picks, 8 picks, maybe, but because all 11 have a legitimate shot, I just don't think there's much room for any of the undrafted guys.
So, John, you got the whole story with Dak Prescott's comeback. You got the head coach in year 2. You got Oxnard, California. And how about throwing Hard Knocks into the mix as well? What are your thoughts on HBO going back to the Cowboys once again?
Yeah, I don't know that it's the best for the team's success. It just seems like it'll be another distraction for them to deal with. But as long as the coaching staff can navigate that, then I don't know. It'll be a distraction because it's obviously camera crew around and all that, but I feel like there's always distractions with the Dallas Cowboys. Like, I don't think that this puts any added pressure on them, because there is already pressure on them to win. They're supposed to be a good team this year. They're supposed to, win this division and get back into the playoffs for the first time in 3 years. So I don't know I don't think it'll add any pressure. I just think that it might make some things a little bit, not quite as smooth as what they would have been without the Hard Knocks cameras around. But, the thing is that they're always going to find, personalities, and Jerry Jones is obviously a layup personality for a show like that. And I think Micah Parsons is going to be a big part of that as well. And maybe a Kelvin Joseph, depending on, if he wants to maybe bring some of his musical background into, one of the shows, because we always see that somehow seems to pop up on these Hard Knocks episodes. Like, that stuff will be entertaining. But I'm also interested in just seeing the way certain people act on the show that I've been around. I wonder, if any actors will come to the surface. And when I say that, I mean, when I'm watching it, people that I'm like, oh God, stop. You're doing that because the cameras are around. That's not even you, please. So I'm interested to see some of that, because, particularly with the coaching staff, like, we haven't had a big opportunity to be around them like we normally would, just because all of last season with COVID, it was pretty restricted. And then obviously a lot of the defensive staff has had some changeover this year. So, I was kind of excited about it. It doesn't cause me any extra issues. I'm looking forward to watching it. I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of footage they get. But I think for people within the organization, I think that, especially for a coaching staff that really needs to get this thing, needs to right the ship, I think that it makes it probably just brings another element into the mix, another maybe possible distraction. But that's why they make the big bucks.
Micah Parsons will be just full of himself. And he already is. And now with Hard Knocks, he'll be one of the lead guys, don't you think, guys?
Oh yeah.
Well, and what's funny about that is that they did this Hey Rookie show going into the draft where it was Micah Parsons. ESPN did this, and it was Micah Parsons, Kyle Pitts, Justin Fields, J.C. Horn, and there was one other player that escaped me right now, but Micah Parsons absolutely stole the show, and it was a setup similar way, reality type show of just how these guys are getting ready for the draft. And Micah Parsons was the guy that he has a ton of different interests, and he's very competitive in whatever it is. So it could be playing chess against Amari Cooper. It could be if the team goes out and goes bowling somewhere. He taught himself how to be a pretty excellent bowler. Like, he'll be in the mix in any of that stuff. So that'll be interesting because I don't think he would shy away from the camera, because he certainly didn't in that show. And then the other part of it for this series in Hard Knocks will be the fact that there's a lot that's going to be on Micah Parsons' plate. And so there'll be storylines there with how he's handling all of that and what the transition is like for him. That's the thing. Like, Hard Knocks, people think, okay, it's going to be about all like the star players. Man, Hard Knocks does a lot of teams where you don't even see very much from the star players in them. Like, there'll obviously be some Dak stuff and things like that, but that doesn't mean that he'll be the leader of Hard Knocks and be the face of it. A lot of times it ends up being a rookie or a guy at the bottom of the roster trying to make the roster and hang on. Or it's some guys that don't make the roster that are on the bubble and things like that. But yeah, Micah Parsons would be my front runner if I was picking right now for who's going to be the star of that show. Outside of Jerry Jones, of course.
Sure.
Yeah, you would think, though, so many coaches are superstitious. I don't know if a team's been on Hard Knocks and then been really good.
They haven't really. I think the Jets, the one year they did it with the Jets, I believe they made it to the AFC Championship game. I could be wrong in that. But then again, part of it too is that they generally don't have good teams on there, because just look at the criteria. Like, you have to have, it can't be a first-year head coach, so that automatically eliminated the Jags, because that would have been interesting with, the whole Tim Tebow thing and Trevor Lawrence and Urban Meyer and that. But so you got that eliminates you. But then the other thing is that, to be honest, you have to miss the playoffs 2 years in a row. So how many good teams, like when you sit there and if you made a list of who are the good teams in the NFL right now, how many of them even miss the playoffs 2 years in a row? They might miss the playoffs once and then they make it the next 3 years and maybe miss it once again. But to miss it back-to-back years, that right there is eliminating all of your, Steelers, Ravens, Patriots, Packers, for most of those years with the Saints. A lot of those top teams, obviously recently now with the Chiefs and that, aren't going to be part of Hard Knocks because of that, because you don't have to do it if you, like I said, if you made the playoffs, every year or every other year. So it kind of weeds out the really good teams. And I also believe, though, even if they did this, 5-part series on the Patriots in some of those years when they were really good, I still think they would have had their ultimate success. It just, Bill Belichick, it would have caused him a little bit more obstacles in the off season. But I think the type of teams that they get on there lends itself to not generally be the teams that make deep playoff runs.
John, what is the timeline right now, as best you understand, in regards to Amari Cooper? Do you think he'll be ready for Oxnard, or is that something that could drag a little bit into week 2 or week 3?
Yeah, in terms of him, hitting the ground running, on the very first day doing everything, I doubt that. I just not necessarily any setbacks or anything like that, but just the way that the Cowboys generally operate. When it comes to a guy that's coming off of an off-season surgery or an injury, they usually err on the side of caution. And so, I think he'll be out there. I just think what will happen is early on, you'll see him doing a lot of individual stuff off to the side, and he probably won't be a full go in every team drill, but he'll probably work in. But I've heard nothing that makes me think he won't be ready for the start of the season. And frankly, I don't think anybody should care if he participates in any preseason games. You should know by now what you have in Amari Cooper, and if anything, it kind of helps you give more reps to guys like maybe a Simi Fehoko, who could be a big-time contributor for you if, let's say, one of those your star receivers go down. Maybe it gives more opportunity to Cedric Wilson or Noah Brown, or maybe, Paul, you mentioned the undrafted guys. Maybe some guy gets more playing time in the preseason. Maybe you can get some looks with the ones just because of that. So I don't think that there's any reason to be worried about his availability for week 1, but, don't be alarmed when you see after that first practice that, Amari Cooper was limited or just worked off to the side with athletic trainers.
How much do you expect to see Tyron Smith really go in camp?
I expect to see him out there probably what he normally would do, which, he's going to have – that was always the thing with Jason Garrett is that, these veteran guys over, they've been with the team, been major contributors for an extended period of time. There would just be those days where you're like, oh, yeah, this guy isn't going today, whether it be a Zach Martin, a Tyron, a Jason Witten, Romo, whatever. I think that's all you're going to see. You're going to see him get his mandatory, veteran days off, things like that. The only thing, though, here's the only difference that stands out to me, though, looking at this year's training camp schedule compared to some of those under Jason Garrett, is Jason Garrett often would go 3 days on, 1 day off. And that's changed this year. I mean, they only have 12 practices, and there's very rarely where they're going more than 2 days. It's usually 1 day, 2 days and then an off day, and then 2 days and an off day. So I think that they're going to get a lot of rest in between. So I just don't see a reason that Tyron can't go for the majority of it, because again, even though it's full pads, they're not always tackling to the ground and doing that, things like that. But he also needs to be out there because they need to build the cohesiveness of this offensive line back up, just because it's been so long since this group has all played together as five, playing together as one. And so I don't think he's going to play a lot necessarily in the preseason, but I think he should be a regular participant in training camp. I don't see any reason that they need to hold him back now.
Now, I know that that there seems to be maybe a lean towards Ezekiel Elliott having a bounce-back year. Obviously, last year, a lot of things, offensive line, fumbles, whatever else. But the Tony Pollard, and a lot of times we fall in love with a guy with his quick strike, and he obviously gave them that last year. But they combined for 80% of the rushing yards Dallas had a year ago. But Pollard had 101 touches compared to Ezekiel's 244. It's not a surprise that Zeke would have 2.5 times the carries. But do you think that this year there could be a little bit of a change with the numbers of how much Pollard gets it as a running back?
I really don't think so. I think that if you see the numbers go up for Pollard and the touches, I think that he would be involved more in the passing game. And if everybody is healthy, which we know probably won't happen just because of the nature of professional football, but if everyone's healthy, I just don't see a lot of room for him, because you're also getting Blake Jarwin back, and Dalton Schultz emerged last year. And if Ezekiel Elliott's healthy and running well, they're not going to take him off the field. He's going to be on the field for, they'll take him off for a breather here or there, but that's not going to lead to significant time for Tony Pollard. Where Tony Pollard really comes into play is if Zeke gets banged up or isn't effective, or if you have some of these receivers go down and they have to mix up some stuff on the offense to where you might see maybe Tony Pollard get a little more touches in the slot and things like that. But if things like, if everyone's healthy and they're running the ball well and they're winning football games, Tony Pollard could kind of be the odd man out, just because there's so many proven weapons on this offense. And if they're all healthy, there's only one football. There's just, not enough to go around. But if Ezekiel Elliott's healthy and playing well, there's just no way that they're going to take him off the field. Mike McCarthy has said as much and shown as much since he's become the head coach, and Kellen Moore has done the exact same since he's been offensive coordinator.
Is he trimmed down? Can you tell? You get to see him enough? Because he did look like he was a little bit puffy last year.
Yeah, I honestly couldn't tell from when I was at OTAs and minicamp. I would just say that he did look really quick. Now, that could also be because he had, a few months off where he wasn't, getting dinged up, because I maintain last year, as bad as the numbers were and how much he dropped off, if you go back to when he had an off week the week before, that following game, those were his three best games, whether it be, week one, whether it be after the bye, or then in that third game when late in the season that he missed, and he came back the very next week, and that was, his other top game. So when he didn't play the week before, then that game that followed, that was like one of his best games, and that's when he was the closest to old Zeke. So, maybe there you go. Maybe that's how Tony Pollard works in, is that they find a way to, maybe give him a little bit more of a workload certain weeks, because they know that they can get Zeke a breather and things like that. Maybe that's how he gets more involved. But if Zeke is playing well, they're just not going to take him off the field.
Well, this is
so people observing Rico Dowdle should not get all that excited.
Damn it.
Yeah, I don't see how it gets down to Sawo or Dowdle. Like, I just really don't. And then the other part of it is just the way that the game has changed to where, like I said, like even if Zeke was to go down, like I don't think that just automatically goes, oh, well, Tony Pollard's going to get 20 carries a game. Like I think he'll get like 12 to 15, but he's going to be used more in the passing game. Everything just seems like it leans itself more and more to the passing game as we move forward. So, yeah, I mean, they're in a good spot at running back to have those two guys. But like I said, I know fans have called for it for the last couple of years because Tony Pollard has shown more of a home run threat. I know that the coaches have their faith in Zeke, and and obviously financially they're invested in Zeke. As long as he can play, he's getting the bulk of the touches.
I noticed this, and this is just a stat that stuck out to me. I don't know if it means anything or not, but Gallup had as many touchdown receptions as Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb, 5, which is a very low number. Obviously, Dak going out hurt, and the fact offensively they were terrible. But Michael Gallup catches 52.7% or 56% of the passes thrown his way. That's a really low number. Now, he's made some spectacular plays. How much of that is his route running? How much of that is his drops? And how much of that is something else?
It's probably a little bit of all those things. I mean, I would say, when like he makes plays and things like that, like I don't think it's the most natural way. Like it doesn't look like the most. He gets the job done in his own certain way, but I don't know that he's like a Des Bryant or something like that, where it just looks like perfectly fluid. He can contort his body. He's got a good sized body, and then obviously the fact that he's got some great athletic ability. But I don't think any of that stuff would be an issue if, let's say, he was the number 2 receiver or maybe even the number 1 on a team. But he's like the 3rd receiver on the team, and there's games where I feel like he's like the forgotten man. And he's good about that. Like, he's not a guy to go in the locker room after and be pouting about not getting touches. Like, it's pretty surprising that, with the ability he has, that he's never been like that. And I don't think anything's changing this year. I think it'll be the same exact way. I think that there's going to be weeks where you barely hear Michael Gallup's name. And then there's going to be a game where he has like 2 or 3 touchdowns or a touchdown in like 150 yards. And to be honest with you, if you're a Cowboys coach or a Cowboys fan, you should be pretty happy about that if that's your number 3 guy, especially considering you pretty much know what you're going to get out of Amari Cooper. It seems like he's a walking 1,000 yards. And then CeeDee Lamb, I mean, I think it's just scratching the surface. I mean, CeeDee Lamb's best football might not even be played for another 2 or 3 years with everything that he can bring. So if not being able to get Michael Gallup more involved is probably a good problem to have.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it. John Machota with us on Wednesdays at 5 from theathletic.com covering the Cowboys. A couple of national stories.